Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode with Concept to Culture. Today, we have with us architect Priyanka and architect Kaushik. They are the founders and the principal architects of Maze Concept. I've been very curious to understand the processes, the story behind Maze Concept. So, I'd sort of hand over this first part to the both of you to help us understand what is the story of Maze Concept? How did you come up with the name? How did the collaboration of the both of you begin in some sense?
Hi Pooja, thank you so much for the introduction. It's great to be here, and we're quite excited for this as well. So, talking about how Maze concept came into existence, before that, I think for me at least, I was always passionate about architecture, and it was something that I decided even before starting the course that I want to do it. And ever since then, I've always had this motivation to start something by myself, and I've always worked towards that, and I've never swayed from that. Yeah, that's what kept me going, and then in the process, I met Priyanka. Yeah, Priyanka, you can tell your inspiration for it.
Yeah, so I think for me also it was something similar. Like I always knew I wanted to do something in the creative field, and I took up architecture because I didn't want to do engineering. Looking at my brother, and he had like this pile of books that he was always studying, and I was like, okay, this is something that I don't want to do. And since I was very artistic, I like to draw, I like to sketch. I was very fascinated by pen and paper always since like I was a kid. So I wanted to get into architecture. And so after I finished my my PUC, I kind of applied for architecture for I did the NADA exam and I did quite well. And then, of course, after architecture, what happened was I joined Khosla Associates and I was an intern there, and that's where I met Kaushik. And after that, we both kind of continued being architects at Khosla. So we worked there for at least, I worked there for 2 years, and he worked there for about 1.5 years. And once we left the firm, he went his own direction, and I kind of got married, and I had my own thing happening. I took a break from work, and then I started getting small projects. Like, actually at that point, I didn't really feel like, oh, I need to jump into work. I was just going, going with the flow. I was just married. I was having a lot of fun. We were traveling and all of that. I didn't have that pressure that I have to kind of get back to work. But then I kind of started taking up smaller projects, like it was my husband's jewelry shop, jewelry store. So I designed that, and then I realized that okay, I am good at this, and I'm getting the hang of it. So one thing led to another, and then I started getting some more projects. Then it got to a stage where I needed some help. Like I needed like okay, I'm like okay, this I can't do this by myself, and then I kind of reconnected to Kaushik, and he was working on a few projects by himself at that point as well. So we kind of reconnected at that juncture, and I told him that why can we collaborate on a few projects, since I know I can't do this by myself. And I remember at Khosla he was really good at the technical stuff, and he was like a really he was someone that I felt like I could really rely on. And I think after that he also said, yeah, I can help you out with this. Let's see how it goes. And then we started working together. And once we started working together, we realized that we make a good team. That also took some time, but we
I think it was about, we started off with one or two projects initially, and in that process, I sort of realized that even Priyanka is a good fit for me as a partner because she's very good with textures and colors and all of
Right.
that, and I'm very weak in that aspect. So it kind of proved that, we make a good team, and from one to two projects led to about 4, 5 projects, and that's when we kind of realized that okay, yeah, it's going right, something's going well. I think it's time we make it official and start a firm, and that's how Maze concept sort of came into existence. The crazy part is that I think it was during COVID is when we made it official.
yeah.
Unfortunately, the first 2 months of our office, physical office being ready, we never worked from there because it was a lockdown.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's when we started the firm. Yeah.
So I think
And
it was a very organic kind of
Yeah.
process.
right. Yeah.
And we didn't really get in touch with the thing that we need to start a firm, or we need to, call it something. We were like, okay, let's just take it how it goes. The more work we got, we were like, okay, now we need a team. We need somebody to help us with the drawings because we have to go to site and we have to do this, we have to do that. Then we hired somebody, and so slowly the team kind of built. And then we were like, okay, now we can't work off cafes and Starbucks or whatever. We need a space. And we used to work out of my house for the longest time. And I remember there was like a bed in the bedroom, and we used to sit near the study and we used to work there. And we are like, okay, this is too distracting. Like, we want to lie down on the bed, we want to go get a coffee in the kitchen, we want to grab a meal. So
Yeah.
that efficiency was not happening. So then once we got our own office, everything got more serious. And yeah, I think that's how Maze concept, just begun
Yeah, yeah,
organically.
What's the story behind the name? Why did you call it maze concept?
I really
yeah. It just came into existence, I guess. So we did.
Okay.
So the reason maze, at least our meaning out of it now is that, like how in a maze you have to figure your way through the maze, right? So there are sometimes you get blocked, you need to go back and then take another path, and then finally you reach or you come out of it. So for us, I think every project is sort of like that, and it comes with its own set of challenges, and yeah, that's how we tackle it. So yeah, that's how the meaning of maze concept and that's how it came into play.
All right. So I think to sort of go a little more to understand a little more about your practice, right? The reason we sort of came up with this podcast was not just to understand what firms do, what practices do, but to really sort of dwell into how are you catering to people and place? How are we sort of evolving when we talk about concept to culture? So, especially when you started off, this is for everybody who's in some sense trying to conceptualize something or trying to, maybe they're on a trajectory like you where they're trying to set up a firm. So, what were some of those major challenges you think you sort of bumped into and you said, okay, this is how we sort of navigate through it? Would there be anything you'd want to share?
So I think when you mention concept, see when we were in college, it was very nice to ideate and to come up with all the designs that we did. But when you speak about culture, when we started working in the different firms that we were interning and working at, then both of us sort of experienced completely different cultures, except of course in Costa when we were together. So it's actually in reality, it's very different. You spend more time figuring out the other things than the concept. The concept part is actually quite easy. It's just one or two brainstorming sessions that you come up with, and then you have the idea. But then after that is how you figure out the process. And for us as a firm, we strongly believe in a collaborative culture. So that's what we have sort of encouraged within the firm as well. And when both of us worked, like she mentioned, our first step was that we collaborate with each other. So that's how we started working with each other, and that's the kind of ethos or that's the kind of culture that we want to create in the firm. And yeah, it is extremely collaborative. Everyone has a point to put across, or it's open, it's an open table, and it at least comes to ideating and taking charge and things like that. So yeah, that's how we look at this particular process.
Also, I think when you go about, when we speak about design as a concept, right, it is a lot more complex than just saying that we are looking at functionality. I think, especially post-COVID, or rather in a lot of practices, this has been intention for a long time that when we talk about design, there is an emotional aspect, there's a psychological aspect to it. So for you as a firm, how important is it to design a space which is catering to, let's say, emotions, catering to baggages in some sense when you sort of create something? I feel this aspect is where the concept sort of comes into play, right? So how much and how important is this vision for May's concept when it comes to beyond just functionality? How do you sort of navigate through that?
So I think like the kind of designs that we do, they're very dynamic as well. And like you said, every space that we design, of course, it is functional, but at the same time, it evokes some sort of emotion. So I think like with the different kind of projects that we have, one is of course residential projects. When we take residential projects as an example, we are either designing for a family, a couple, or a large family, a nuclear family. So it completely depends on who we are designing it for. So we try to completely understand who we're designing it for, who are these people that we're designing it for. We try to create this relationship between us, the designers, as well as the clients. So it's going to be a long term relationship for a while at least. Like if it's an interior project, it might last you, say, 6 months to a year. If it's an architectural project, it may last you 2 years, 3 years. I'm still doing a project for a client of mine, and it's gone on for more than 3 years because she still calls me now and says, I want to add something here. I want. So it's a relationship that we've built. We have also evolved as people, and so have they, right? So number one point, I think, when we are designing in terms of emotions, we have to understand who we are designing it for. And we design a lot of hospitality projects as well. Again, there as well, we need to understand who are we designing it for. Are we designing it for younger generation? Are we designing it for somebody who's going to come and enjoy the food, or are we designing it for somebody who's going to come and enjoy a drink? So I think that is one. Another point can be context. I think Kaushik can elaborate on context, because where are we designing it? Is it
Yeah, that actually plays a very important role as well, because we can't force a certain style of design into a place that can't accommodate it. So it's very important. When I say context, it is basically how the site is, what are the heights that we have, because that play a very important role in the how you sense or how you feel the volume of the space. And another thing is whether it's outdoor or whether it's completely indoor, or whether it's next to a beach, or the climate comes into play there. So context is also important, and we develop our concepts based on context as well. When I say beach, there is actually one project that we've done called Dubki, and this was actually a project where our clients gave us a complete free hand, and it was located on a cliff next to a beach. So, here, believe it or not, the most important factor that defined our concept here was the sea breeze, the actual fluidity of the ocean, and in terms of materials also, where the functionality comes into play, it was actually the amount of salt content that's there. It's very humid, and you can't use materials like metal and MS and things like that because they weather fast. So that is one project where context played a very important role in defining the concept.
So I think I have seen this project, right? And I think even without you saying all of this theoretically, the moment you see that space, you see everything that you're talking about coming into play. Because there is a lot of fabric element that you've used, right? A lot of things suspended from the ceiling, and you can see that connection. So when you sort of build, or when you sort of integrate these various elements, right? There is some sort of integration of memory, identity, and in some sense, community into the build space. Because I think, like Priyanka said, it's so important you speak about whom are you catering to, who's your sort of end user group, right? But also today, I think we're in it's a world of options. It's a contemporary setting, but there is a huge voice art and craft has sort of also found in a very long time, right? So it is a boon and a bane sometimes for designers to marry the two. So, in such a setting, how do you marry what we call as context, memory, identity, and community? A lot of different things into one. But one anchor would be starting with the user group, right? But beyond that, what are some other approaches you take as a practice to really bring out something that is a lot more impactful?
So one aspect for that would be through collaborations.
Mm-hmm.
So in most of our projects, at least the ones that are more towards the public, like your hospitality or F&B projects, those are the projects I feel where you can actually explore in this aspect, because you're designing for the public. A lot of people are going to come there, they're going to experience the space, they're going to remember it, they're going to see what's on display there, or how the aesthetics of the space is. So collaboration is key, is what we feel, to define this. And in all our projects, we've actually collaborated with so many different artists and so many different just creative minds, even in terms of the guys who are just doing the branding, or
sculptures, art,
cultures, and yeah. So
posters?
yeah, it is ultimately collaboration, and the essence of the collaboration is again comes down to the concept. So that's how it is. So collaboration is key if you want to build an identity for a space, or build a character for a space, and you get different various skilled people to work on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
I
I
think.
think, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so like we design, like he said, because we design a lot of public spaces. Each space that you go to, I'm sure you will remember one or two elements from that space. Like say we
Yeah.
designed, like I'll take an example of 1522 Adda that we designed. So that was like a old school Bangalore kind of a vibe. So we added a lot of, the Mangalore tiles that we use. We also have like Paul Fernandez, a very famous artist. So his work kind of replicated on the walls. So that is like the old Bangalore, like say you'd say Bangalore Club or like Corner House or MG Road, things like that. So it does bring back memory. It also starts a conversation. So once you go there, you're like, okay, yeah, this is, whoever is sitting there will point it out and say okay, and they'll say something that they remember from that image, or you start conversation about it. So I think that is your memory recall, right? So we do work with a lot of like branding agencies in that way, and these are the small things that we can incorporate. So I think the hospitality, when we talk about that, is what we love about doing hospitality projects, is that like the dynamic space that we can create, we can really explore, and we have the freedom to play with colors and create identity for these spaces and kind of create a whole story around this space and
Yeah.
how the person feels like when they experience the space. So that is why we like working on hospitality projects. The same thing when we talk about a residence, probably like we designed a residence for a couple who kind of traveled to Spain and came back, and they were very inspired by Gaudi's work. So they wanted to do like a swirl on the ceiling, and so we kind of replicated it. We made it our own by simplifying it and made it more homely, made it like we kind of tweaked the design in a way that it would fit into our space, but still like when they experience and sit in their living room, they will remember their trip.
Yeah.
Or like when they have friends over and maybe someone asks about the ceiling, it starts a story of
Yeah.
how they traveled there, or so that starts a conversation. So I think that evokes memory, and like you mentioned, the kind of feeling that you experience in space.
Which I think memory, I feel, is such an integral part. It's either memory that you're carrying or memory that you're creating for somebody who's
Yeah.
experiencing that space for the first time,
Yeah.
which I think is very interesting, right?
Yeah.
But is this done very intentionally? Now, when I say concept to culture, right, eventually anything we're creating, no matter which field of design, we are in some sense creating a cultural impact. There is a cultural influence, and whether it's the clothes, it's the products we make, or even the built environment, right? But is there ever a time you're sitting across the table when you're conceptualizing and you're saying, okay, this is the kind of cultural impact I want to create, or is it more something that happens organically? It's more very process driven, and then there's an outcome, and great, there is an impact. How is it for you all?
See, I think for that it depends on the kind of projects we're working on. It's hard to, for us as architects, clients give us the brief, right? So it's very hard for us to impose our ideas on something that's conflicting to what the client wants. So I would say at the end of the day, it's ultimately the client who kind of defines at least the initial bit of that process. And then, of course, like we mentioned earlier, those are the aspects in terms of context and all of the other things that we spoke of, is how it becomes a process driven process. Sorry, it becomes a process driven way of arriving at the final product. So yeah, I think it's a mix of both. So sometimes the client comes to us and he says, "This is the site," and you come up with whatever you want. That's when Dupki is one example of that, and we are
We have the
extremely
freedom.
fortunate. We were extremely fortunate to get a client like that who
Right.
gave us a complete free hand, and that's a very rare case, at least in our field.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think I'm just curious to sort of, this is usually when I see multiple architects in a firm, right? I'm very curious to sort of know, how do you all navigate this? Because I feel there is a conflict of interests, there is a conflict of styles which sort of, happen when you sit down to discuss. So Tell me a little about your personalities and how has that helped you in your own way, both in a good and a bad way, to evolve May's concept? Because we are definitely talking about the finessed version of May's concept, but I'm sure it's not as easy as and as organized as you're making it sound, because I'm sure there are days where both of you are like, why are we doing this? Right? So take me through a little bit of your personalities and how is that spilled into evolving your firm?
I think we are very different personalities, and that is why we kind of work together. And we've had our share of fights initially,
Yeah.
like when we started, I think the first 2 years we have fought a lot. But then after that, so I mean, let me start off with me. I am a very outspoken kind of person, and he is a very soft spoken person. And I think that is why we are like two pieces of a puzzle that kind of matches.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
And in terms of office also, in a way, I like managing more at office, and just checking and see what the team does and all of that. My likes, again, like she mentioned, I don't really like social media that much. That way, my personality is very different from hers. So, in fact, there have been many times where I think, in terms of our design sense, also, we are very different. So, our own, the architects who worked with us over the past 5 years have sometimes told us that your design, the way you design and the way she designs are completely different, but somehow it comes together
Yeah.
and creates
But
that product.
yeah, but
So,
I
yeah,
think when we sit down and we kind of brainstorm on a design,
yeah,
we are very collaborative in the sense we do like a few things, but we're very open to listening to each other.
yeah,
When I start off an idea, he kind of bounces off it, or when he has like a concept in mind, or he's already thought about how to begin a certain project, I take it from there. Like I start thinking about it from where he left off, and that's how we kind of create the concept and we work together. I feel like whenever we design, we need each other, and that is when it actually becomes our design. There are times where he has designed something with when I'm not available or something like that, and then I come back and I'm like, but this is missing. Or when I design something, he definitely has like a comment for it, or he will tell me, do this so it looks better, or do that so it works better functionally.
yeah.
So that way that is how we kind of collaborate. We kind of complete each other in terms of designing. Even when it comes to how an execution of a project is of our project, he kind of takes the first half of the project, where the technical bit, the planning, the zoning, all of that are his strengths. But when it comes to furniture, layout, colors, and putting things together, making it look like a whole, it kind of comes to me, and then we
Yeah.
kind of bring the whole project together towards the end. So that's how we've been working since the beginning, kind of set in after a few projects that we worked on. Initially, we used to work on every single thing together. As and when the firm grew, we slowly started segregating things, but still, even now, we do a say in every single thing, because I think we both are a little OCD about the
A
work
lot
that
of things,
we
yeah.
don't like to let go. So we want to poke our nose into everything, and yeah, so
It's
that
a
is how
process,
it
and
is.
we've also built a lot of trust in this
Yeah.
process. So I know for a fact that now I don't have to think about color or texture or in terms of furniture or the aesthetics and things like that. I don't have to worry too much because I know that she will do that. So it's just the trust that we build, and it's very important to build that trust. Otherwise, it's never going to work.
Yeah,
And yeah,
100%.
it's not like it was a smooth sailing journey. We did have our ups and downs and all of that, but you need to believe in the idea and sort of move forward or learn from that and move forward.
Yeah, and
So
and how much do you think design has changed life for each of y'all? Because I truly believe today, even when I go in to teach, right, this is something I sort of tell students that forget about looking at life the same way that you do once you become an architect. It is even in the little things. As much as you want to look at this as, okay, 9 to 5, I sit on the desk and think about design, it's not going to happen, right? It's a very cyclical process. So I think our personalities build also in this process. The way we perceive life absolutely shifts, right? So what has that journey been for each of you? How has it evolved you personally as humans to begin with?
So for me, at least just when we started designing, or when I was in college, Pinterest is something that all of us have access to, right? And there's so many ideas that are out there, and you're looking at that just on your computer screen as an image, and you just get inspired from that just by looking at an image. When we started designing, it also enabled us to travel more, I would say, and in this process, at least I tend to observe a lot of things. So when I travel, I just look around, I see how things are, and this is something that my observation skills or something is something that I've developed after I finished my architecture course, and I realized that it's very important to just look around. Like, you just don't have to travel and just do the touristy things. You can even look at the buildings that are there, look at the walkways, you can see how the public spaces are done. I tend to sort of think about, oh, why would they have done it this way, or ask myself these questions, even though it's just going on in my head. If my wife is there, she won't know what's going on in my head. But sometimes these are the thoughts that go on, and like, yeah, this is traveling, I think, is the best way to get inspired and remember things by.
Okay. And for you, Priyanka?
Yeah, I think like he mentioned, wall, what material has it made done on the table? We're always kind of exploring and feeling walls and things and things like that. I think it has changed us as people. Like you said, we were different in college, and then when we grew out of college and we went to work, the whole work culture is so different. It kind of makes you more disciplined in certain ways. You have like for me, after becoming a mom, things changed again for me, because initially it was all work, 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 work for me. After when things got really going for us at Maze, but then after I became a mom, things again changed for me, because it was like, okay, baby, baby, baby. So managing the two also was difficult, but like I think being an architect, you do have this like particularly, like even when I see a drawing, like I want all the lines to be straight, I want all the text to be in the same line. I'm very OCD about those things, because we're constantly checking drawings, they're on site, you want all of those. So even at home,
In our daily lives, I guess. So, yeah,
subconsciously.
Yeah.
subconsciously.
I think it is also very, very difficult to segregate the two, right? It's very easy to say, I'm going to shut my laptop and I'm done with a work day, design field, right? Because you're done maybe with doing a drawing, but your mind is creating, thinking there is really
Even after you shut your laptop or you come back from work, you want to watch a movie. You're just watching the movie and you're like observing that person's house, or you're like, oh, look at, maybe we can do it somewhere else. Look at that color palette. So it's everywhere.
especially in a creative field, right? There are in everything, there is a doing and a being aspect. And I think doing is when you're doing whatever, you're getting things done. But I think that being aspect is so powerful because that's really where the brewing is happening. The design, the creation is actually sort of happening, right? So if there is something that I have known both of you since university days, and it's fascinating to see how much you've evolved to be talking to you as professionals are so holistic in your own sense. When I see projects that sort of come out and I know that it's led by the both of you, I don't think I speak enough, or I don't think I've ever shared this with you, but there's the sense of pride that, I've somewhere known you in the process of your making. But I think to sort of why I'm sort of getting here is to ask you what is something in the field of education, right? There are more architects who are sort of coming out. You've gone through the process of formal training and education. If there is something with your experience of setting up a business, right? What is something that needs to shift in the narrative of architecture? If there is anything you think.
So, actually, for this, I have a very great point. So, one thing I've observed, even you're in US right now, one thing I've observed in other countries, right? There's a very strong regulatory body in place, and there is a definite need for an architect, at least abroad, and that is one way why every public space, or that's why cities look beautiful. So because it's designed so well, why it's designed so well? Because it is, the regulations are being followed, and there's a very strong body that oversees that and all of that. So I think that is what is missing here. There's definitely no, I would say that there's a lot of talent here. We're definitely not lacking that. It's just that if in college at least we are made to believe that we're doing this to improve people's lives, and
Yeah.
It's what buildings define how you are or how you work and things like that. So this comes into play if there's more recognition at least given to this fraternity here. I'm not saying in terms of the private sector, I'm saying in terms more in terms of the government sector, because that's where I think that is where some sort of change or a new policy should come into place, where it's a bit more stringent and it's a bit more stricter. Trust me that there is enough job opportunities there to accommodate everyone and all of that. So I feel like more than education, it's there that change has to happen. Automatically, things will fall into play after that.
You will be surprised. I asked this question over and over again to get more perspective on this, and 80% of the time, this is the answer I get, right? That I think there is at a regulatory level, at a policy making, at so many other, important stages, it's important we start involving architects and elevating that for a better living for the masses, etc.
Yeah, so the architectural community and the interior designer community in India is also really evolving because it's become a very collaborative kind of a fraternity. And like now I can see like everyone likes to share contacts of vendors, contractors. Everyone has become very collaborative. They want to help each other. They want to push each other, like the younger community at least. So I think that is a great thing that is happening because there are times where like I'm looking for a vendor or we're looking for a new material of how to source it, and I'm a part of so many of these groups now, and I kind of just post it and people are so happy to help
Well,
and they want designers to connect now, and
mhm.
there are so many new artists who work with different kind of materials, whether it's paper mache or new materials coming in to create light fixtures, or like macrame, and there's so many different things in the market now. So I think that is something that which is evolved and I really appreciate right now. But another thing is probably in the universities, in colleges, we don't, until we actually come to the office culture, we don't understand how these designs really work. I feel that was lacking in my, where I kind of,
Experience.
I think that was everywhere, not just
yeah,
in your
because
college. Yeah.
coming out of college, I underestimated myself. I did not know if I could actually design a space. But once I started doing it, I learned by myself that, yeah, I can do this. In college, I didn't know how to work on a software. I don't know how the colleges are now because the interns that we get are pretty good. But at that stage, I felt like the softwares were lacking. Maybe they can really teach the 3D modeling softwares in college because that's how you really learn how a space comes together. Yes, working with hand models is very important, but at the college level, I think if we get a better experience of how the drawings really come to life, then whoever comes out of college will have more experience or like understanding of how these designs work. Like it won't be like starting from scratch all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
I think
think
that
that
And
gap is very
yeah,
true.
that
Yeah.
gap, we need a bridge between the college life and the office
Yeah.
culture. What
100%.
is what is 2D on paper and what actually is on site.
It evolves into. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Be more
So I
field experience. Yeah.
So I think that's something which was spoken about a lot, even when we were, in college. It is the narrative. I think when you also go in for internship and come back, you can feel the difference. You're like, oh my God. I think a lot of us said this on the first week of internship. I don't know what I did for 4 years in school,
Yeah.
right? But I was having this conversation with architect Madhuri in one of our podcasts, and she said, I understand the need to sort of stitch the two together, but also the intention of education sometimes is it's your formative years. It's to be able to think, to really critically think, right? So I think it's multiple perspectives and sort of meeting each
yeah.
other midway in some sense. So I think
Yeah.
I'd like to sort of end this podcast. This is my favorite part where I'd want to ask each of you, there is so much happening in the world, right? There is, with the world we're living in, there are opportunities, there's so many things around you, but there's a reason you have chosen every day to fight the battles that you do, to defy the odds, and to make sure you fall deeper in love with what you do, right? Why is it that you're choosing to show up to do this particular thing every single day? What is it that's really driving you to choose this despite whatever it brings to you?
I think for both of us, it's just that one main driver of this is our passion towards the field, is our passion towards creating something.
Mm-hmm.
That, and apart from that, for me personally, is I like just being out there. I don't like sitting on a desk throughout the day. In at least in this field, I get to go out, I get to meet people with so much experience, just the carpenters that we work with, and you just learn so much by just talking to them. So that is what I really enjoy, and that is what I really look forward to, because these experiences just even shape your personality. As you gain more and more experience in the field, your personality keeps evolving and you become even more mature. And this is one field where there is no end to learning. That's what I enjoy. So there is always something new that you can do. You just have to be, you just have to have a crazy idea and just go for it, even if you think it doesn't work. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Perfect. And I think at the end of the day, there's nothing more fulfilling than seeing that hard work fruition into whatever it does, right? Like I said, defying the odds on days when sometimes you don't have the labor that shows up, maybe your contractor goes missing, but despite all of this hustle, right, it feels like it's worth it.